It was meant to be an ordinary evening of accolades in New York City, the usual pageantry of a glittering red carpet, relentless camera flashes, and punchlines wrapped in thinly veiled political satire. Nothing to raise an eyebrow. That is, until Caroline Levitt made her entrance. She appeared draped in an elegant, deep emerald gown, her trademark silver cross glinting gently against her collarbone. Her posture was poised, her presence undeniable, the kind of quiet confidence that spoke of belonging, even if she wasn't cut from the familiar cloth of showbiz regulars. But it wasn't just Caroline who turned heads. It was the man at her side. Charles Cooper, her husband, a former Marine with the composed bearing of a man who had stood firm in the face of true adversity, accompanied her. He was a man of few words, yet his very presence drew attention. Though unknown to the celebrity sphere, there was an air about him that commanded stillness, an unspoken strength that didn't need performance. The press took notice immediately. "Who's that with Caroline?" someone murmured. "Her security?" "No," came the reply. "That's her husband. I think he's a veteran." Inside the grand hall, a low ripple of curiosity spread like smoke. Whispers turned into chatter. Tension brewed beneath the glamour, a sense that something had just shifted in the atmosphere. As guests settled into their seats and cocktails made their rounds, the lights dipped. Stepping into the spotlight was the evening's MC, Daniel Cox, a charismatic figure known for his wit and sting. Wearing his trademark smirk, he wasted no time drawing laughter from the crowd. "Tonight, we've got the full circus, politicians, actors, and folks who still swear the moon landing was staged," he quipped, earning scattered laughs. Then, his tone sharpened, slightly playful, but with a deliberate edge. "And now we welcome Caroline Levitt, the nation's favorite lightning rod." And she brought along a husband who looks like he walked straight off a Marine recruitment poster. Laughter rolled through the audience. Caroline's face remained composed, her smile unchanged. But Daniel's jaw tightened, just a fraction. John wasn't finished. "Honestly, I thought he was her bodyguard at first. Then I saw the ring." "Wait, she married him? What happened? Was Jack Reacher already taken?" More laughter. Louder this time. But the camera drifting past their table caught something else. Caroline's still, elegant calm, and Daniel leaning close, voice low. "You all right?" he asked. "I'm fine," she replied evenly. "But he won't be." Without hesitation, she folded her napkin and rose. Daniel followed. Together, they moved quietly backstage. On stage, John kept the jokes coming, unaware that the mood in the room had subtly but unmistakably changed. Moments later, just as John began another dig, this one about campaign slogans, the lights flickered again. But this wasn't scripted. He paused, scanning the stage in confusion. Then, a fresh spotlight snapped on, casting a glow on the left wing. From the darkness, Caroline stepped forward, poised, steady, radiating purpose. She wasn't scheduled to speak. No cue had been given. Yet there she was, making her way to center stage with the calm authority of someone who no longer needed permission. The crowd hushed. John blinked in disbelief. Caroline? What's going on?" he stammered. Without looking at him, she picked up the spare microphone. Her eyes never left the audience. "Since John brought me into the narrative," she began, voice calm, "I thought it only right to respond." A few awkward chuckles followed. She continued. "It's simple to stand on a stage like this and throw jabs at people who don't share your bubble. But John didn't just joke about me tonight. He belittled my husband, a man who dedicated 10 years of his life to serving in the Marine Corps. A man who's faced authentic danger, not rehearsed pyrotechnics." The atmosphere thickened. Glasses were set down. Conversations halted. "When I walked into this room, I knew I didn't fit the mold. I'm not part of this ecosystem. I come from a world of service, discipline, and honor, where leadership isn't mocked for entertainment." She glanced at John. His smile had vanished. "And for the record," she added, "if you're going to mock my husband, at least be clever." Jack Reacher? Please. Let's be honest, Jack wouldn't last 2 minutes with this man. That landed. The silence fractured into applause. A whistle or two. Several guests rose, veterans, allies, people who understood the weight behind her words. She paused, then offered a final, quiet blow. John, I don't need a blockbuster film to earn a voice. I just need to speak plainly. She returned the microphone, turned, and walked off stage, her heels striking the floor with crisp finality. The spotlight trailed her like a closing stanza. Back behind the curtain, Daniel waited. That was something, he said softly. Caroline offered a faint smile. It needed saying. Back under the stage lights, Daniel Cox was no longer entirely himself. His polished ease had frayed. Producers whispered furiously into his earpiece, urging him to press forward, stick to the script. But John had just been publicly upstaged, and the digital world was already ablaze. Clips of Caroline's words were exploding across social media. Her rebuttal, particularly the line about not needing to be a movie star, was going viral. John didn't care about optics. Retreat wasn't his instinct. He returned to the mic, tugging his jacket into place, flashing a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Well, he said, voice lighter than his expression, looks like I've been given a master class by the First Lady of Primetime News. A few scattered laughs, mostly uncertain. But come on, if I had $1 for every time someone on the right said they were offended, I'd be wealthier than I already am. Some clapped. Most didn't. The tension remained. Still, John pushed forward. Look, I respect the troops. But let's not confuse proximity with qualification. Marrying one doesn't make you a general. There's a line between experience and ego. The silence that followed didn't feel neutral. It felt cold. And just like that, the atmosphere froze. The energy fractured. Even those seated at John's own table went still, not because his comment was bold, but because it was reckless. Backstage, Daniel had remained silent. Until now. You mind if I go out there? He asked Caroline quietly. She didn't answer. She simply stepped aside. Moments later, the double doors parted once more. This time, it wasn't Caroline who emerged, it was him. Charles Cooper. 6'2", composed and unshakable, walking steadily down the center aisle. No rush. No pause. Just a grounded, unwavering presence that seemed to anchor the entire room. Daniel Cox turned. His expression faltered. May I speak? Daniel asked, his tone low but unmistakably clear. A stunned stagehand handed him a microphone. Daniel faced the audience, then turned to John. Crack all the jokes you want, he said evenly. But the moment you mocked her leadership, you crossed a line. She earned her voice. You just pretend you deserve yours. One line. A detonation. A sharp inhale swept through the crowd. John was frozen. Daniel offered a brief nod, returned the mic, and exited without fanfare. No raised voice. No confrontation. Just truth, dropped with the force of a closing verdict. By the time the broadcast cut to a break, the entire tone had shifted. X, the platform formerly known as Twitter, erupted. Hashtags like #WhitmoreWalksIn, #MicDropMarine, and #NotJustBodyguard surged across timelines. The clip of Daniel's quiet stride, followed by his measured, incisive words, she earned her voice. You just pretend you deserve yours was everywhere. People didn't just share it. They transformed it. Edits appeared with orchestral swells, slow-motion replays, dramatic lighting effects. Memes, tributes, and montages poured in. This wasn't anger. This was conviction, carefully delivered by a man who didn't need volume to command attention. Media outlets scrambled. NNC aired a breaking segment within the hour. Silent strength. Levitt's husband silences Hollywood with one line. But it wasn't just conservative circles amplifying the moment. Over on Global News, anchor Nancy Howard read the quote live. Marine confronts comedian, you pretend you deserve it. Even late-night hosts, from Matthew Torres to Gideon Keys, took a beat. Normally quick to support John, they hesitated. Because this didn't look like satire anymore. It looked like arrogance met with grace and lost. By sunrise, Caroline's inbox was overflowing. Emails came from every corner. Veterans, students, journalists, working parents. Many had never written to her before, but they all echoed the same refrain. You didn't raise your voice. You didn't stoop. You brought dignity into a space that had forgotten what it looked like. And truth did the rest. Daniel, meanwhile, hadn't even opened his phone. He stood in the kitchen, brewing coffee like it was any other morning. Caroline, still wrapped in her robe, leaned on the counter, watching him. You know you kind of broke the internet last night, right? He gave a faint smile without looking up. All I did was speak plainly. She tilted her head. Exactly. That's what made it land. Back in Silver Lake, Daniel Cox sat alone in his home office, glued to the screen. The same clip on loop. Comment after comment. His name trending not for a new series or a smart monologue, but because he'd been called out. Publicly. Quietly. And people were siding with the man who'd done it. That guy is dangerous, John muttered. He wasn't talking about Daniel's military background. He meant influence, the kind that didn't need PR teams or punchlines. The kind you couldn't control. His team scrambled. Phones buzzed. Assistants flagged viral threads. Publicists drafted statements, pitched interviews to outlets like Society Weekly and Frame. We can spin it, someone said. Say it was misinterpreted, another added. Or a joke that didn't land right. John exhaled slowly. No, he said. We don't apologize. Silence fell over the room. But even he knew, this wasn't about PR anymore. He wasn't just losing the narrative. He was losing the spotlight. Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., Caroline stepped behind the White House press podium. She didn't reference the event. Didn't name names. She didn't have to. But the reporters weren't about to let it go. A correspondent raised a hand. Ms. Levitt, any thoughts on last night's viral exchange? Caroline's tone was composed, unhurried. I think my husband's words spoke more clearly than anything I could add. He wasn't defending me. He was defending respect. That quote alone surged past 1 million views by midday. Invitations flooded in Good Morning America, the National Roundtable, First Light with Jackson Lee. But they all asked the same thing. They wanted the couple. Not separately, together. The country had seen high-profile partnerships before. But this felt different. This wasn't about fame. It was about solidarity. About shared ground and quiet resolve. Backstage at the Republic View, just before their segment aired, Caroline turned to Daniel. You sure you want to do this? She asked gently. He shrugged, adjusting his collar. I don't love the spotlight. But if it shuts down more guys like Callister, then yeah, let's go. That evening's interview pulled in record numbers. When Daniel spoke, people listened. It wasn't about defending her, he said simply. It was about reminding everyone, having a microphone doesn't automatically make you worth hearing. And just like that, the wave rose again. Headlines called them a modern-day political partnership, equal parts strength and stillness, clarity and conviction. They didn't wear polish like movie stars. But they were grounded. Genuine. And that, people realized, was rare. Tom observed it all from a pristine penthouse suite in a downtown Montreal hotel, his face unreadable. Eventually, he reached for his phone and dialed his attorney. Just a few hours later, a plain manila envelope arrived at Caroline's office in Parliament Hill. No logo. No return address. Daniel sat beside her, cradling a cup of black coffee, as she carefully tore it open. Inside lay a dense legal dossier. At the top, bold and unequivocal, Notice of Defamation Concern, Thomas Cruise. It was now official. Tom Cruise was preparing to sue. The wording was meticulous, measured, but the message rang loud and clear. The document accused Caroline and Daniel of making statements that had tarnished Tom's public standing. Without a formal and public retraction, legal proceedings would commence. Caroline exhaled, not in fear, but in concentration. Daniel leaned toward her, brow furrowed. He's actually doing this? She gave a single nod. Yes, he'd picked the wrong adversary. That evening, she didn't tweet. She didn't appear on television. Instead, she retrieved a weathered, encrypted flash drive from her desk drawer, labeled only Gibson 19. She plugged it into her laptop and entered a 10-digit password. From the couch, Daniel watched her with quiet intensity. You're opening that? Caroline gave another nod. If Tom wants a public brawl, I'll give him a public ledger. Inside the folder, archived emails, timestamped screenshots, detailed annotations. All of it traced back to 2019, the year Tom Cruise abruptly withdrew from a Veterans Benefit Gala in Toronto. He had publicly pledged to attend. Privately, he vanished without warning. At the time, Caroline had been a junior aide to a Canadian MP. She had witnessed the unraveling firsthand and quietly recorded everything. This isn't revenge, she murmured. It's about a pattern. He ridicules service, disrespects those who serve, and hides behind charisma. By the following morning, her communications team had crafted a statement, sharp, poised, and unflinching. We have received Mr. Cruise's legal warning. As someone dedicated to documenting verifiable truth, I do not fear lawsuits from celebrities, but I am very much prepared to reveal the full archive of Mr. Cruise's behavior regarding our military communities. If a public forum is required, I welcome it, whether in court or in front of cameras. The internet ignited. Conservatives rallied. Centrists listened. Even left-leaning veterans lent their voices. One posted, I was there in 2019. Caroline's telling the truth. Cruise ghosted us the day of. We were embarrassed. Meanwhile, in his public relations war room, Tom Cruise stood frozen, gripping his phone and a lukewarm espresso. What the hell is she holding? He snapped at his advisors. But no one could answer because no one truly understood how far Caroline Leavitt was willing to go. That night at CBC's downtown studio, the lights were dim, almost reverent. The set was stripped to its essence, a single silver microphone catching the glow of one spotlight. A glass of water. One vacant chair. Beneath Caroline Leavitt's poised hand lay a printed statement, weighty in every sense. Next to it, the flash drive labeled Gibson 19, its ink bold and ominous. The focus was singular, her. Host Andrew Keller introduced her with careful intensity. Tonight, we're joined by the Federal Press Secretary, Caroline Leavitt, not for routine commentary, but to answer a legal challenge from actor Tom Cruise. The camera found her. No smile. No theatrical pause. Just steady resolve. Her voice, when it came, was even and direct. This week, I received a legal demand, she said. From a man who belittled my husband's military service and collapsed the moment public scrutiny turned his way. That man is Tom Cruise. Silence fell like snow. In my time in Ottawa, she continued, I've learned one thing. Those who shield themselves with status are often the least equipped to face transparency. Wordlessly, she slid the flash drive forward. This holds email records, internal memos, and direct correspondence from 2019 documenting Mr. Cruise's decision to abandon a veterans charity event. Over 100 servicemen and women were denied the resources and recognition they had been promised. This wasn't confusion. It was deliberate, and he's never taken ownership. Andrew blinked, caught slightly off guard. Even he hadn't anticipated the extent of her response. Caroline turned to the camera, knowing full well the scale of her audience. You've sued me, Mr. Cruise, claiming I've injured your reputation. What I possess here isn't rumor. It's proof, in your own language. If we're heading to court, I'll bring this with me. But if you'd prefer to withdraw your suit, I'm open to dialogue. Not for me, but for the veterans you neglected. The digital sphere erupted once more. Hashtags surged. Hashtag Levitt responds. Hashtag Gibson 19. Hashtag service before spotlight. On forums and feeds, veterans posted their own memories from that 2019 benefit, photos of half-empty rooms, missing banners, confused guests. One image bore a heartbreaking caption. "My father waited in uniform for hours. They told us Cruz was coming. He never showed." Mainstream media could no longer look away. CTV, Global News, even international outlets picked up the thread. Cruz's team stayed silent. His attorney declined to comment. His publicist released nothing. And on social media, once his personal stage, Tom Cruise went completely dark. At home, Daniel rewatched the interview on his laptop, arms crossed on the kitchen table. "He's not going to answer, is he?" he asked. Caroline, seated next to him, offered a quiet shake of the head. "He already did, in writing." But the ripple effects reached beyond politics. In the polished corridors of Hollywood, nervous whispers began. The Gibson 19 file wasn't smoke, it was fire. Industry sources confirmed her claims. Confidential memos surfaced. Cruz hadn't withdrawn due to scheduling. He had objected to the charity's conservative affiliations, too provincial, too politically inconvenient. One assistant had written, "Not a strong look. Let's move on." In a moment, the narrative shifted. This was no longer about tabloid chatter or personal vendettas. It was about a high-profile figure who abandoned a promise to veterans for the sake of personal optics and a woman who refused to let silence settle in his wake. Then, the twist no one foresaw arrived. Keanu Reeves. Known for his grace, his distance from scandal, his quiet dignity, he broke his long-held silence that evening with a single, piercing post. "I was invited to that same veterans event in 2019. I showed up. Tom didn't. I saw the heartbreak on their faces." Caroline Levitt told the truth. "Our veterans deserve better." 5 million views in 3 hours. The message rippled through every corner of the industry. One by one, others joined the chorus. A lesser-known actor gave an anonymous quote to Screen Weekly. "Cruz has pulled out of commitments before if it didn't polish his image. Caroline just showed the receipts." A veteran producer wrote bluntly on social media. Mocking a Marine's family and then trying to silence them with legal threats? Caroline had every right to respond. A left-leaning columnist added, "Agree or disagree with her politics, Tom lost the moment he made this personal." Caroline, meanwhile, remained publicly silent. No retweets. No victory laps. When briefly asked about Keanu's statement, her only reply was, "That took courage." I respect it. Inside Tom Cruise's camp, chaos reigned. His publicist pressed hard for a pivot. "We have to flip the script. Regain the narrative." But Tom, exhausted and cornered, shook his head. "No. We need to vanish." But the hour was already too late. Even comedians who had once idolized him now tread carefully. Tom Cruise picked a fight with a Marine's wife, one quipped, and lost to a flash drive. Back in their modest kitchen, Daniel watched the fallout unfold with a quiet smile. "Did you ever imagine Keanu Reeves would be the one to stand by you?" Caroline laughed softly. "Honestly, I was rooting for Clint Eastwood. But Keanu? I'll take it." Then, as if on cue, the atmosphere changed. A faceless blog emerged with a baiting headline. "Is Caroline Levitt really the patriot she pretends to be?" The article was vague, cryptic references to discontent among her staff, whispers of manipulation, insinuations that she had leveraged her husband's service to boost her own platform. Within hours, a trio of copycat articles appeared. By nightfall, a new hashtag took hold. Hashtag Levitt Lies. Caroline didn't flinch. She recognized the tactic. It wasn't scrutiny, it was sabotage dressed as concern. When they could not fight you, they tried to bury you in mud. Daniel handed her the phone. "You want to say something?" She studied the screen, then calmly shook her head. "Not yet. I want him to think it's working." What Tom Cruise didn't realize was that Caroline had seen this play before countless times. She had watched the same smear machine activate when powerful people felt exposed. So she had prepared long before this began. She had implemented staff feedback tools, anonymous performance reviews, open-door policies. Not just to shield herself, but to protect her team. Because if there was one thing that united DC and Hollywood, it was their shared appetite for dismantling outspoken women. But Caroline wasn't playing defense anymore. She was setting the board. For weeks, she had quietly gathered evidence. Not gossip, not counterattacks, but verifiable, irrefutable documentation, employee testimonials, exit interviews, archived footage from veteran events she'd attended without fanfare or press. She compiled everything into a single digital archive and gave it a name both clear and unshakable. Truth over spin. Then she posted it, just one message on X. Some fight in daylight. Some strike from the shadows. I prefer facts. Here's mine. Attached was a 2-minute video reel. It began with grainy phone clips, veterans embracing her at quiet functions, some tearfully thanking her. Then, candid testimonials from her team, past and present, offering raw, unscripted praise of her fairness, decisiveness, and integrity. Finally, a retired general filled the frame and simply stated, Caroline Leavitt carries more honor in her smallest gesture than most accumulate in a lifetime. It landed with force. Not a media spectacle, a moment of truth. Within 6 hours, the post amassed over 10 million views. The smear campaign crumbled in real time. The hashtag Leavitt Lies collapsed under the weight of its own hollowness, replaced by a new one. Hashtag Leavitt Leads. And once again, Keanu Reeves, quiet, elusive Keanu, shared the video with 3 words. This is integrity. Inside Cruise's inner circle, the panic shifted into something darker, resignation. His lawyer spoke first, voice low. She's not building a defense, he said. She's building an empire. His publicist nodded grimly. We can't beat this. She's turned a counterattack into a movement. She's bigger now because of you. Tom Cruise said nothing, just stared at the video, watching it loop again and again. Silent. Still. Once, he had embodied the archetype of the noble American hero, the one who stood for honor in the fiction he portrayed. But now, the public had found a new archetype. One rooted in reality. In substance. And she didn't need a blockbuster. Or a franchise. Or a camera crew. Tom Cruise never issued a rebuttal. No televised apology. No crafted message from his PR team. 2 days after the release of Truth Over Spin, his legal team discreetly retracted the defamation threat. No headlines. No explanation. Just a quiet vanishing. The fight was officially over. But for Caroline, victory wasn't the end point. She had one more truth to share, something deeper than retaliation, more enduring than a win. At the annual National Service Honor Forum in British Columbia, a gathering where veterans, military families, retired commanders, and dedicated volunteers convened each year, Caroline approached the podium. She wore a tailored navy blazer, her silver cross pendant glinting under the soft amber hue of the late afternoon sun. The crowd, numbering in the hundreds, fell silent as she took her place behind the microphone. Some in attendance anticipated a speech of vindication, a triumphant address, a final strike at the man who tried to silence her. But Caroline had come to deliver something very different. A few weeks ago, she began, her voice steady but full of feeling. Someone with a powerful platform mocked the man I love. Not just his military service, but the values he lives and breathes. When we chose to speak up, it wasn't for headlines. It wasn't for votes. It was for something this country has been taught to whisper about: honor, faith, and decency. The applause was immediate and resounding. She let it wash over the moment before lifting her hand gently, bringing calm back to the gathering. This was never about Tom Cruise, she continued. It's about every household told they should sit down for believing too deeply. Every woman dismissed as too strong, too direct, too unapologetic. Every soldier who was celebrated on the battlefield but forgotten once the news cycle moved on. She scanned the crowd, faces weathered by service, youthful eyes lit with pride, and quiet civilians who had shown up to listen. "I didn't come out on top because I had more likes," she said, her voice softening. "I came through this because I refused to be silent." The room rose in unison. Applause thundered again, this time with emotion behind it. Even members of the press, veterans of skepticism and spin, stood and joined in. Some blinked away tears behind their lenses. From the edge of the stage, Daniel stood watching, arms folded, his pride wordless but unmistakable as his wife stood at her full height, resolute, unshaken. Then came a moment no one expected, a letter, delivered by one of the event's organizers and read aloud to the crowd. It had come from Keanu Reeves. Courage isn't always found in battlefields or bulletproof vests. Sometimes, it's in the quiet defiance of standing firm in truth when the spotlight is meant to break you. Caroline Leavitt reminded us all what leadership truly means. That night, no headline mentioned Tom Cruise. Instead, the coverage celebrated something else entirely. Caroline's name stood alone not in scandal, but in service. Caroline Leavitt closes the chapter with grace and resolve. From threatened to trusted, how one voice rose above Hollywood. Not just a conservative icon, a voice for those who serve. Back in their kitchen, Caroline quietly placed the Gibson 19 flash drive back into her drawer. Not as a prize, not as a token of triumph, but as a quiet symbol, a marker of what had been risked and what had endured. "I didn't come out of this because I'm flawless," she said to Daniel, leaning against the counter, her voice lower now, thoughtful. "I made it because I stood while others waited." Daniel gave a slow nod, the corners of his mouth lifting with a mix of admiration and understanding. "Some folks think fame makes you untouchable." Caroline's gaze was unwavering. "But today, we showed the world truth still speaks louder. Even when Hollywood is shouting."